welcome everybody. On behalf of the USC Alumni Association, we are very excited to welcome you to the Stress Detox, Resiliency Through Times of Uncertainty. My name is Chelsea Watkins. I am the president of the generational group, the Second Decade Society. I am also on the planning committee of the Alumni Leadership Conference this year. So if you have any suggestions, please let me know. I am a second generation dual degree Trojan. My parents went to SC. I have a BA in International Relations and French. I have an MFA in screenwriting from the film school. And I am currently, I have several projects in development that are all stalled right now because production shut down. And for the past 10 years, I actually started and ran a college consulting company. And that has been wound down to focus on the writing projects. Let's see, what else can I tell you? I have 2 fabulous children, a husband, a cat without a tail, and a gecko. So, and what's interesting about today's call is our refrigerator broke this morning, and the refrigerator repairman arrived 5 minutes ago. So I had to rearrange everything. He's working on the refrigerator. Ritu helped me take a few deep breaths. And here we are. So moving on, before we get started, I want to just give a quick disclaimer. We are not medical or mental health experts. If you are having a problem, please seek professional advice, medical professional or additional support. Tanya mentioned to keep it in speaker view. That'll give you the optimal viewing experience. In terms of questions, there were so many great questions put in on the registration form. We've pulled out some to address specifically. We'd like to address as many questions as we can. So if you want to put them in the chat box as we go along, we will address them if appropriate at that time, or we'll save some till the end and address them at that point in time. And moving on to our program and our wonderful speaker, as we all know, this is a very unprecedented and difficult time. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of going crazy with the quarantine. I'm ready for it to be over. And I'm sure many of you are feeling the same way. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Ritu Riyat. And she is an expert in stress detox, and she will lead us through the program. So take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. As Chelsea introduced me, my name is Ritu Riyat. I'm located here in the Bay Area. I attended USC for my master's in public health back in 2004, and I'm currently a public health professional specializing in stress and burnout in the workplace. So I just really want to say, first off, I am right there. I don't have any magic pills or anything to eliminate all of the stress that we're all experiencing. I have been doing this work for a long time. I'm deeply rooted in mind-body practices, and I've been riding the waves of stress and anxiety along with everyone else. What I really hope to offer through sharing some of the context that I have with the Stress Detox is hopefully a different perspective that you can take away with you around how you manage and shift stress in your own life. So with that, I want to start by, I'll be sharing my screen, and I want to start by asking a question to all of you. We're going to be using a tool called Mentimeter. So you can go to menti.com. And let me just put this up. Share. Okay. Just give me a second. So this is just to help make it a little bit more interactive for all of us. We're going to answer this question. I just want to know, before we really dive deep into this material, where is everyone at? How are you feeling? How are you doing? What is your current stress level? So go to menti.com, use the code 400812, and you're just going to select one of these 4 areas. And we're going to take some time, let this populate. We have a lot of people on this call, and this is really to help us all get a sense of where we're at. The folks on this call, these are your neighbors, your colleagues, your friends, your family. And without a lot of us not being in physical proximity to one another, or really being connected in that way, we can kind of lose sight of where each other is at. Or as we're settling into week 7 of shelter in place, we can begin to kind of feel like, there's this sense of normalcy, and some people may be more comfortable than others, and you can kind of start to feel really alone in how you're feeling around your stress and anxiety. So this helps us to see where everyone is at. And what you'll probably notice is that we are all over the map, right? And stress is constantly changing. What you're experiencing today may be different from yesterday and maybe different from tomorrow. It could be different from what you were experiencing this morning to what you're experiencing now. And wherever you're at is completely fine. However you're feeling is okay. So I'm going to give it another moment to let some of these responses come in. Take a look at the screen as well and just kind of notice where these numbers are at. Would say about, over 50% are experiencing moderate to extremely high stress. So we're all in this, and we are all in this together. And that's probably the most important thing to take away from this, is that you are not alone, right? And these numbers will continue to come in. I'm going to move on to re-emphasize that you are not alone. Over 77% of our population is experiencing symptoms of stress. And actually, this number was pre-pandemic. We were already on the verge of burnout in our workplaces and just in our lives. And the pandemic has probably tipped us over in many aspects. For some, it's helped us reel it back a bit. So again, we could be all over that spectrum. What exactly is going on with stress? What exactly is it? In a very simple definition, and this is a definition that I like to use, stress is our body's natural response to change. Simply put, change occurs, and change is constantly occurring, right? We know that change is constant. It occurs in little micro movements in our body. Every breath we take is a change. Every heartbeat is a change. So change is constantly occurring, and our body's responding to that, and that response is stress. Your body is releasing those stress hormones in order to adapt to that change. That adaptation is what we call resilience. So resilience is our ability to adapt to change, right? And that's what our bodies are, resilient beings, because they are constantly adapting to the changes that are occurring within our body. And then on more of that mental or cognitive level, there are changes that occur outside of us, and we exercise our resilience in order to adapt to those changes. When stress or when change occurs, everyone is somewhere on this stress spectrum. So this is a nice graphic that really shows the stress spectrum. Now, we often think of stress as being bad for us or being really unhealthy, but what we do know about stress is that it's very important and crucial to us and to our functioning. When we don't have any stress, when we have very little changes, or we're in control of our environments. Let's say we're hanging out on a beach in a hammock, one of my favorite things to do. You're relatively calm. You're in control of that situation. It's where you want to be. There's probably very little change that's happening. You're probably in this range over here, which we call calm, or in the workplace, it could be understimulated. Now, when there's a healthy challenge that's introduced to your life, there's an increase in change, and there's an increase in the release of stress hormones. So we got the adrenaline, we have cortisol that's coming in. As those increase, we enter this zone of eustress, EUSTRESS. And this is kind of our optimal performance zone. This is when we are in that flow state. It's when we have that healthy challenge and we're actually motivated and driven to overcome that challenge. The challenge, in a way, is under control. It's also pushing our comfort zone just a little bit, just enough to keep those stress hormones flowing, but we feel like we can overcome that challenge and can accomplish that challenge. Now, when the challenge becomes too much, or if there's more things that are introduced to you in that moment, let's say you had a deadline and now someone piles on one more thing and it just tips you over the scale. Now you feel like you are no longer in control of that situation. You may not think you're going to get it done. There's more stress hormones being released into your system. And now we begin to tip over into this space of distress. This is when we start to feel anxiety, we start to feel pain, we start to feel overwhelmed, and we may even reach levels of burnout. We have physical symptoms, emotional, mental, behavioral symptoms that are associated with distress. Typically, when we say, I'm so stressed out, you're probably referring to this space of distress, right? We all want to have that healthy amount of stress in our life. And when we optimize stress, it actually improves well-being, it fosters creativity, and it boosts productivity in our life. So what do we do about it? How do we actually manage stress? Now, the goal here is not to eliminate stress, as we just saw on that previous slide, because we all want a healthy amount of stress. So instead, it's to optimize stress. And I love this quote by the late William James, who's considered the American father of psychology. The greatest weapon against stress is your ability to choose one thought over another. Sounds simple enough, right? Very difficult to do. If only we can all control the thoughts in our mind, we would probably all choose to be in that optimal performance zone and just be conquering everything. Unfortunately, that's not what happens. Thoughts are very difficult to control and we're constantly distracted. And so we enter into this space of distress. But what if we could control them? And what if we could exercise more resilience? When we're resilient, we are resilient when we have awareness. We understand our own reaction to change. We begin to understand when we're moving across that spectrum from being understimulated or in that space of calm to entering into eustress to kind of hitting that tipping point of distress. And we can understand how change is affecting us. We are resilient when we have empathy. We understand others' reaction to change. So we can have and exercise emotional intelligence and see how other people are feeling and experience that with them. And we're resilient when we're in action. You know, we recognize that reaction to change and then we do something to reduce stress when we're about to tip over. So that's really what we're trying to exercise. And when we exercise resilience, we're able to manage stress better. Again, we're not going to eliminate it, but we're able to slide ourselves down that scale, moving from distress back into eustress, back to calm before we hit burnout. The stress detox framework that I created applies principles of meditation, behavior change therapy, behavior change theory, habit design to help individuals and organizations build resilience and shift their relationship with stress. And the way we do that is through this 3D framework. Develop awareness, discover hidden stressors, and do something about it, which sounds pretty similar to what I just described as resilience as. Now, there's no shortage of information out there around what to do about stress. You could do a simple Google search and you will have thousands of tools, tips, techniques to do. Many of you are probably doing a lot of these: breathing exercises, checking in with yourself, meditating, going for walks, being with nature, talking to somebody. There's so many across the board. So there's no shortage of exercises to do, yet we're still hitting, epidemic levels of stress and burnout. What I think is happening there is that we are bookending our days with these exercises without actually strategically applying them when we encounter our stressors. And typically we encounter our stressors throughout the day. And they may be little stressors, small stressors that we encounter throughout the day that we are unaware of, that begin to kind of hijack our minds and release cortisol into our systems. And then we encounter another stressor and another stressor, and it begins to have this compound effect. And then maybe you come home and your child says something to you and you completely blow up at them, right? Or your spouse says something, or you see the cake or cookies, and that is exactly the meal that you need to have in that moment. And it's because you haven't addressed the stressors as they were occurring throughout the day. And then all of a sudden you can say, well, my family stresses me out, or my work stresses me out, or I just don't have, the confidence in changing my diet, or I just can't exercise. And none of that is the case. So what if you actually were to become aware of when that stressor was taking place throughout the day? Maybe it was a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m., you have a standing meeting. And that's when you recognize some of your own personal stress symptoms begin to show up. Maybe you get the sweaty palms, your heart starts to beat a little faster, your breath gets a little bit more shallow. You maybe have some back pain or some small little pains that begin to emerge. And you go into a state of inquiry. And you ask, well, what exactly is going on here? What may be the stressor? As you continue to ask these questions, you may discover that, having that standing meeting with your boss, you don't feel heard or you're not acknowledged. And that actually is the stressor. We do know that when we don't feel seen, heard, and acknowledged, that's a huge stressor. It's a big reason why diversity and inclusion practices have become really important. It's because they do carry a level of stress for us when we don't feel included or heard or acknowledged. But once you inquire and you become aware of that, you can now do something. You can intervene. You can maybe have a conversation with your boss, or you may just become aware of it. Oftentimes, simply becoming aware of that stressor kind of alleviates that energy around it and dissipates you from entering into a deeper state of distress. It kind of breaks that stress response cycle. In order to do any of this, we must first develop awareness, right? So this is the key. You can't get to where you want to go if you don't know where you are at in this moment. A big reason why I asked that question at the very beginning of this session of what is your current stress level, and rating that stress and checking in with yourself and knowing that it's constantly changing. When we develop awareness, we then begin to pick up on those subtle symptoms that are constantly happening, right? Your body is going through changes all the time. There's always those subtle changes happening, those subtle symptoms associated with stress or excitement or whatever emotion you encounter. It's just that if we're unaware, we don't recognize them happening and we just carry on in our life, in our day-to-day routines. The average adult actually spends about 47% of their waking time not aware of what they're doing. We are pretty much just going through the motions throughout the day. And until we become aware, it stops us in our track and we can recognize, oh my gosh, I'm tipping over into distress, or I feel very understimulated and I'm calm right now. So awareness is developing an understanding of where you are on that stress curve, what your personal stress response is on that mental, emotional, physical, or behavioral level. Having that awareness allows you to choose differently. It gives you that little microsecond of a pause where you can decide to respond to a situation versus react. Ultimately, it does give you the ability to choose one thought over another and helps you take back control of your life. So how do we develop awareness? Well, there are a number of different tools, but the one that I really depend on and think works to develop our awareness is meditation. And of course, we've heard a lot about meditation, especially over the last decade. It's really grown in popularity. There's a number of benefits associated with meditation. What I like to call it is applied meditation. It's more than just sitting by yourself in silence. That, of course, is the kind of mental workout, right? You do that to develop your awareness muscle and really exercise your ability to become aware. But then when you're in your waking time, now you're in your waking time more aware of your surroundings externally as well as more aware of your surroundings internally. So with that, I would like us all to practice a short meditation exercise. Now, I will caveat this by saying that I am a huge advocate of meditation, and I do think that it has a lot of benefits. In our current situation, as we're all experiencing different stress levels and our mental state can be all over the place, sometimes it may not be accessible to sit in silence and just, breathe. Our minds could be all over the place. If that is the case for you, what I recommend is to start with maybe a mind-body practice. Do something where your body is also involved, and you can maybe go for a slow walk without any music, just kind of focusing on your breath. You can do some stretches and a yoga practice, maybe even coloring in a coloring book, knitting. All of these things help to slow down the mind. It helps to slow down the heart rate. And it allows you to get to a place where you can then sit in silence and stillness and really get deeper into your meditation practice to develop your awareness. Okay. But what I'd also like, I'm sure everyone is at different experience levels with meditation. The type of practice that we are going to do is a breath-focused meditation practice, kind of based off of the Vipassana style and lineage, which is the practice that I've trained in. And it's really to become aware of the subtle qualities of the breath and the subtle sensations that arise on our body. Okay, whatever those sensations are for you, it's completely fine. What I will also guide you into is eventually in your mind saying inhale as you notice yourself breathing in, and saying in your mind exhale as you notice yourself breathing out. Now, this just gives your mind something to do, especially if there's a lot of chatter going on up there. This will give your mind something to focus on, which is also connected to your body, which is the breath. So let's go ahead and experience that together. If you're sitting on a chair, just start by sitting at the very edge of your chair. You just want to have your sit bones on the chair. Your feet are flat on the ground. Knees are at a 90-degree angle or just slightly below your hips. This just helps to keep the spine nice and straight. The hip flexors are slightly open. You can take the shoulders back and down a couple of times. And then resting the hands in your lap and softly close the eyes. Take a deep breath in through your nose. And exhale out. Now just take a moment here to notice any thoughts that begin to arise in the mind. Remembering that as you become very still and silent, the mind may become loud and chaotic, and this is completely natural. And it's not that these thoughts are emerging at this very moment to sabotage your meditation. But in fact, these thoughts have probably been there throughout the day, just operating in the background of your mind as you've been distracted with other things or going about your day-to-day tasks. And when you become still and silent, these thoughts that have been in the background now come to the forefront. So just take a moment to acknowledge that these thoughts exist without attaching to these thoughts, without judging these thoughts. Simply acknowledge that they are there. And then, like clouds in the sky, allow the thoughts to float on by. As you bring your attention and your awareness to the very tip of the nostril and the space above the upper lip. Keeping your attention and your awareness here in this one small region of your body. Begin to notice any subtle sensations of the breath as it flows in and out through the nostrils. Perhaps you notice the texture of the breath or the temperature of the breath. Maybe you notice the speed of the breath. Whatever sensations you observe is completely fine. Simply notice and observe the sensations as they arise in your body in this one small region at the very tip of the nostrils and the space above the upper lip. Keeping all of your attention and your awareness here at this one point. Noticing any sensations at all. Maybe there's a tickling sensation or a prickling sensation. Just observing the sensations without reacting, without judging, without analyzing. Noticing that as the sensations arise, they also fall away, constantly changing. Now, keeping your attention and your awareness here, connect the mind to the breath. As you observe yourself breathing in through the nose, say in your mind, inhale. And as you observe yourself breathing out through the nose, say in your mind, exhale. Again, as you observe yourself breathing in through the nose, say in your mind, inhale. And as you observe yourself breathing out through the nose, say in your mind, exhale. Continue at your own pace, keeping your attention and your awareness at the very tip of the nostrils and the space above the upper lip. Keeping your mind connected to the breath, the inhales and exhales. If at any point your mind wanders away from your breath and gets caught up in any thoughts at all, just acknowledge that your mind has wandered away. Become aware that the mind has wandered away. And just simply disconnect from the thoughts and nudge the mind back to your breath without judgment, without analyzing the thoughts. Continue to say in your mind, inhale as you breathe in, and say in your mind, exhale as you breathe out. We'll continue in silence for just another moment. Again, notice where your mind is at. If it's wandered away from your point of focus, acknowledge that your mind has wandered away and disconnect from wherever it's gone and gently nudge the mind back to your point of focus, to the tip of the nostrils and the space above the upper lip. Bringing your mind to the breath and continue to say in your mind, inhale as you breathe in, and say in your mind, exhale as you breathe out. from this place of clarity and connection. Now bring to your mind one experience you had today that you are grateful for. Regardless of how small or large this experience, visualize it happening and allow the sensations of gratitude to wash over you. Release this experience from your mind and bring your mind back to the breath. Go ahead and take a deep breath in through the nose and breath out. Begin to wiggle your toes and your fingers, just reawakening your body, reawakening your mind. And then inhale, take the arms up over your head, stretching all the way up through the fingertips. And draw your hands down to heart center. Begin to rub the palms together, generating some heat between your palms. Go ahead and cup your eyes with your palms. Take a moment here, allow the heat to penetrate through your eyes. And then blink the eyes open inside of your palms, allow the light to trickle in. And when you're ready, you can bring your hands down to your lap. Great. So I'd love to hear, that was just a very short meditation practice. We just spent a few minutes in that practice. I'd love to know how that experience was for you and how you feel at this moment. So again, we're going to go back to menti.com. Use the code 400812 and tell us one word that describes how you feel right now. Just drop in one word that describes how you feel right now. What I really want you to take away from this experience is that in just a few short moments, you can bring yourself back to a place where you feel relaxed and calm, peaceful, thoughtful. You know, you may even feel overwhelmed, but what you are doing is you're recognizing and you're checking in with how you're feeling in this moment. And as I mentioned before, you can't get to where you want to go. And if that's a place of less stress, more control, more calm, you can't get there if you don't know where you are in this moment. A few short moments of meditation is not meant to completely eradicate your stress. Instead, it's meant to help develop that awareness so that you can recognize where you're at and maybe strategically implement some of those stress management techniques that you already have a part of your life. So take a look at this word cloud. Of course, relaxed and calm are quite large, and that's the general feeling that we have, but we also have distracted and frustrated and anxious and scattered. So we are all over the place, but we're aware of our feelings and where we're at right now. So I hope that provided you with a different perspective around stress and building resilience and applying meditation into your day-to-day life. Chelsea, I'd love to have a conversation with you now and kind of hear about how that experience was for you.
Absolutely. And I think these slides are great. And some people have also written some questions that I think are amazing. So I'm actually lucky. This is like the second or third time I've done this with Ritu in terms of preparing for this. So it's what's interesting, I think, about a meditation practice, and I'm not great at it. And I can explain why, but I think it does build on itself. Would that be accurate, that this is something that if you do consistently, it improves, and it's not so much that it's this magic panacea, but that the more you do it, even if it's a couple minutes a day, if it's 1 minute, 2 minutes, over time, you'll start to feel a lot of benefits. And I felt them. I mean, I think this is the second or third one that I've done with you, and it's like exponentially different than the first time. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the first time we did it together and you were like, "Oh, I don't really meditate. I rather do the mind or the body movement practices," which a lot of people, and I'm a runner, I'm a long distance cyclist, and I definitely, have come from a place where I used to say running is my meditation until I actually discovered and sat down to meditate. And they are unique in their own ways. And you're correct. It does build on each other. I think it's important I do want to emphasize that, we did just do a short few moments of meditation here. And there is this idea that, gosh, I need to sit down for 20 minutes. And of course, that would be great if you had 20 minutes a day to meditate, if you had an hour a day to meditate. But that simply is not available to many of us, especially these days. So what I often say, it's better to do 5 minutes a day than to do, 20 minutes once a week or 1 hour once a month.
well, this actually leads into another point that I want to bring up that I felt was so sort of monumental for me and my understanding, is that it doesn't have to be this an hour, even with exercise or even with meditation, but this idea of doing micro sessions throughout the day can really change things. So it's not, like you said earlier, we tend to bookend our days. We work out in the morning or we work out in the evening, but then we have this whole day where all of this stuff happens. And just simply maybe taking a moment every hour or two to stand up, do some, small bits of exercise, jumping jacks, or you said squats, taking a moment to, close your eyes and do a quick 1 to 2 minute breathing meditation exercise, I think can really help, so that we don't get to the end of the day and, your kid does one tiny thing and you blow up, or your spouse does something and you get all upset, when you're not really upset at whatever the thing is. You're upset at whatever happened all throughout the day. So I think that's a really important point. And I want to let you know, everybody who is asking questions, we are recording this and we will also send out a link to you all afterwards, so you'll be able to come back and reference it. Go ahead.
I just want to kind of going off of what you said, the micro movements, and I know I had said that in previous conversations that we had, especially right now, one of the things when we do talk about in a very practical way, how do you manage stress these days? And people ask me that all the time, like, how do I manage stress? And especially when we first got into, especially the shelter in place situation, and the first thing to go was routines, right? Our schedules were thrown off. We were all working from home, and routines kind of went out the window. And I thought I was very disciplined with all of my routines. And I started noticing very quickly, some of my most important routines were just not happening. And so I had to step back and really create those routines for myself. The reason that we do experience stress is when we feel like there's a loss of control. And I mentioned that as I was talking about that stress spectrum or the curve. As things start to pile on, we no longer feel like we're in control of the situation. And when that happens, our body associates that with as a threat. And that means we want to either fight or flight. We want to save ourselves. Stress hormones start to really flood our system. And so taking it back and recognizing, in this situation, where can I have a small aspect of control? For many, that's going back to your own personal routines. For me, that was doubling down. And what I like to say is go back to the basics. Hydration, the food I'm eating, and how I'm moving throughout the day. And even if I didn't have time to go on, long runs, or I could no longer go to my yoga classes, how can I build in micro movements throughout the day? If I started feeling like I couldn't solve a problem when I was working, I would just step away and go do 5 squats. Or I have a trampoline and I would just jump up and down on the trampoline for a few minutes. And it sounds funny, but it's amazing how that can just shift things up. And then you can step back into whatever you're working on, and you're able to tap into your creativity and be more productive.
So in a way, what's fascinating is that we start out in this calm state, but when we're really in flow, we're in that eustress state. So we are in a state of stress. We're just in that positive, stressful state. So I guess the question is how do we get into that state, and how do we stay in that state? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I think, first off, it goes back to the sense of attachment. And this is what meditation teaches us, is to not be attached. So if you have this positive flow state, what you'll probably realize is the moment you recognize you're in this flow state and you really begin to enjoy it, and now you want to hold on to it, it's gone. Right? And now you're just flooded with, you're in a state of distress and you're wondering, how did I get there? Because a moment earlier, I was just in this lovely eustress state. And so one, it's not really about staying in any one state, but more so recognizing when you're passing into that state of distress. And I think that's the most important transition that happens, is recognizing that you're starting to feel overwhelmed, you're starting to feel like you just are not functioning optimally, you are getting that brain fog, you can't really focus, you're getting agitated, frustrated, maybe a little bit more emotional in the situation. And when you recognize those symptoms, even if it's, you start to notice some unhealthy behaviors, like you pretty much had a great diet and all of a sudden you really want to have the cookies. You really want to, maybe move to other substances as a way to calm yourself down, right? A glass of wine every single day or a couple glasses, and then having the coffee in the morning to pick yourself back up. So recognizing those symptoms and becoming aware of them, and then introducing some positive routines to bring yourself back out of that state of distress. One of the best times to really activate meditation, implement your routines, is probably when you're in more of a state of calm or like that eustress space. When we're in extreme distress, and telling someone to sit and meditate could just agitate their mind even more. So finding, like I mentioned earlier, some of those mind-body practices to calm your nervous system in a very tangible way, and then sitting to meditate and becoming aware.
I think that's a really interesting point of the mind-body practice almost first, because sometimes, and there are many people who brought this up, and I'm this way as well. Sometimes we're so agitated and we're so in the middle of everything. I'm not going to sit and meditate for 5 minutes. I'm just not going to. Like, I will bounce off the walls. So this idea of having that intermediate step where you do a mind-body practice, or you physically do something, like you said, jumping up and down on the trampoline, or something to get your body into it, so that you release some of that nervous energy, and then you can sit down.
Yeah.
I sometimes a lot of people think that, oh, everybody else has this fabulous practice and they can just sit down and zone out, when I don't necessarily think that's true. I think, especially for those of us who are type A, like, we are constantly on the go. So, we need something of that intermediate period to get the energy out so we can sit down. Would that be an accurate statement, I guess?
Absolutely. And traditionally, coming from the yoga practice and that lineage, yoga, the asana practice, the physical yoga practice that we do, that's become quite popular here, was designed to tire out the body and the mind and prepare you to sit and meditate. So it opens your body up, create some flexibility so that you can sit in this posture for an extended period of time, but also tires your mind out so you can sit and meditate for longer. Same thing would go if you did go for a run, or just even did some of these micro movements, as I mentioned earlier, to get some of that energy out, and then try sitting. And even if you're sitting for 2 minutes, it's better than 0 minutes. And even if when you sit, all you do is take a few deep breaths, that's better than not taking any at all, or, not sitting to do your meditation practice. So I highly recommend introducing meditation into your day-to-day routine. If right now it's first thing in the morning, that's fine. The more frequently you do it, what you'll recognize is throughout the day, you can just drop into it with more ease. There's a question that keeps popping up. A few people mentioned around sleep, and I want to address that because I think it's really important. Good sleep is hard, and it's been hard these days to attain when your mind is very agitated or there's a lot going on. What to do? What not to do is to get on your devices. If you wake up in the middle of the night, to get on your device, to start searching, even if you're searching, how do I get back to sleep? That's what you don't want to do. But what you can do is, again, try to disconnect from this expectation of, I need to have good sleep, because the more you're expecting something to happen, it's actually going to create more stress. And you probably have experienced this yourself. I know I have, where I'm looking at the clock and I know I definitely want to get sleep. And the more I'm looking at the clock, the tougher it is to get sleep. One recommendation I have is, and the way that it's been described to me, which I really appreciated this learning from one of my teachers, is that sleep has two purposes. It gives your mind rest and it gives your body rest. And when you're lying in that horizontal position, you're resting your body. And ideally, if you're getting into that deep REM sleep, you're resting your mind. Now, if you can't get into that deep sleep, you're still resting your mind by disconnecting it from analyzing, right? When we're analyzing and we're thinking and our thinking mind is on, it's active, it's constantly working. But when we're able to disconnect from that and we're just in this state of observation, as we were doing in our meditation practice, just observing sensations without analyzing them, you are able to drop your mind into more of a resting space. So I would recommend trying that. It's, your mind will naturally activate, and then you intentionally have to bring it back into observation, and it'll activate and you bring it back to observation. But as you continue to practice that, one of two things will happen. You'll spend longer time in observation, i.e. rest your mind, or you'll just fall asleep and get into that deep sleep you were hoping for.
I'm going to add something to it. It may not be the same as what you just suggested. And because I know a lot of people are saying no devices in bed and don't get on your screens, and I totally agree. However, there are a lot of amazing podcasts on sleep meditation. And so what I do when I wake up in the middle of the night, and there's one, I think the one I've been listening to is called Sleep Cove, is I put on my headphones and I put the podcast on, and it's a meditation podcast about falling asleep, and I'm asleep in, I don't even remember. A lot of times they have advertisements at the beginning and I don't even remember the end of the advertisements.
Yeah.
So that's something that I do. And then if that doesn't work, Sleep Cove. Yes, let me just put it. Yeah, Sleep Cove. Then if that doesn't work, if I'm still too agitated, I will put my headphones in, turn on Netflix, and put on an old episode of Cheers or Parks and Rec or something like that. And there's something about the dialogue of people, another story happening takes me out of my story that I'm telling myself at that moment. So that's, and then I've also noticed with me, I've been doing a lot of sort of heart opening poses, stretching, back bends, things like that. And that really helps sleeping. I've found. So
absolutely. I will say, and the first you mentioned with the Sleep Cove and the meditation, which somebody has mentioned in the chat, Yoga Nidra or restorative yoga, kind of similar to that. Those are sleep meditations. I wouldn't recommend doing the Netflix and the old shows and the dialogue, because it is still activating your mind in some way. I know a lot of clients of mine and a lot of people do use that as a way to fall asleep. Trying to wean yourself off of that and moving more towards getting into your breath and into that calm, relaxed state on your own, or using the Yoga Nidra to fall asleep.
We talked a little bit about this, and I think it kind of goes along the same lines, like, when dropping into mindfulness immediately doesn't work and doing that intermediate step. But what happens when you're in that hyper excited state where you're almost paralyzed by fear? What can we do then if what are three things to do immediately at that moment just to get us out of that state and into a calmer state, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think some of the things that I had suggested earlier, again, it comes back to when we're stuck in that fear state is because we feel like we have no autonomy or no control in that situation. And so snapping yourself out of that. And the best practice to do is to, when you're in a calm state, write down the things that you do have control over. You have control over getting a glass of water and drinking it. You have control over, maybe moving your body, or control over breathing deep. Write down what your go-to strategies are going to be and have that visible for you. Because oftentimes when you're stuck or paralyzed in that fear state, the last thing that comes to your mind is the things that you need to do or you could do. So having that visible so that you don't even have to think about it. You are aware that you're kind of paralyzed in this fear state, and you go straight to what your basics are going to be to snap you out of it. It could be, jumping up and down. I mentioned jumping a lot. I do like jumping up and down a lot, and dancing, or having a song that I know will snap me out of it. And I already have a playlist. That's my, I'm going to get out of a funk playlist, and I pop that on and move around. And it's amazing, within moments, I'm smiling and laughing, and I'm no longer in that fear state. Because these states, they are fleeting. They are constantly changing. As we mentioned at the very beginning, change is constant. And so and resilience, one of the pieces of resilience, the three pieces were having awareness, empathy, and action. And so even when you feel stuck or paralyzed, still being in action and writing down what those things are and going right to them when you can.
Fantastic. And I love, so we're going to wrap up because we're heading on 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Know everybody has places to go. But really quickly, I love the idea of when you're in a calm state, writing down what you have control over. Because there were a couple comments about, well, what happens when I go to the cookies or the brownies or that glass of wine? Well, you know what? That really is something you have control over. I can decide that that I don't have to go to those cookies. And I think if you do that when you're in the calm state, it's sort of like, the best time to have a difficult conversation with somebody close to you is when you guys are both calm, not when you are angry and upset. So when you're calm, to start to look at these things and saying, oh, I do have control over this. Oh, I can do my mind body practice. Oh, I can do my meditation. And the idea is that we enlarge, I guess I can call it a stress threshold. So something that, some people are right here when they go into distress. Maybe how do we get here and here and here and here so we can just handle more and more things in our life as they're constantly changing.
Absolutely. And that's actually building resilience. And that's what we're doing, is building our container of resilience. And along with that, you said something that was brilliant. And it was that, I'll paraphrase it by saying having self-compassion. When we do end up going to things like the cookies and the wine, recognize it, writing that down and having that conversation when you're in a calm state with yourself, and having compassion and forgiveness if you didn't do it. If you did end up having the cookie, it's okay. Having compassion for yourself. And then the next time you can approach it again differently and choose a different.
Well, dark chocolate and red wine both have antioxidants.
Yeah. Well, with that, I know we're out of time. This is such a wonderful conversation.
As we wrap it, can you give us maybe three action steps that we can all do today? Or actually, we've done our meditation, so we'll count that as action step 1. What are a few others we can do today or tomorrow to immediately implement this in our lives?
Yeah, absolutely. So meditation for sure, even if it's just a couple of minutes. I think after this call, write down what your routines are going to be and put them on a sticky note. I like to have Post-its around. So write down what your routines are, what your basics are going to be that you're going to go back to. Maybe it's hydration, maybe it's eating good, your routines around work-life transitions, when you're going to have the meditation practice, and developing your awareness. So that comes along with the meditation practice, which is going to develop your awareness. But the next time you notice yourself feeling some of these stress symptoms, pause and ask, go into a state of inquiry. What's going on here? And it just takes a moment, but asking that question will help you will bring some insight into your life around what really is creating some stress.
Fantastic. So I think with that, we'll wrap it up. I want to give a couple of, let's see what I have here. I have all my notes that are, make sure that I say everything. If you are more interested in any of Ritu's programs or the Stress Detox, you can go to her website. Actually, you know what? I'm going to type it in the comments.
I can actually share a screen that has my last
Why don't you do that? If you
on
if you
it.
share that, but also put it in the comment. I think that's it.
So just for anyone that's interested, kind of next steps along with everything we said, I do have a course on Udemy. It's called the Stress Detox, and it's been amazing. I have over 2,400 students so far in this course that just launched last fall. You will have access to this course. I have a discount code that is available to you. I believe the code is Fight On, but I think we'll share that in any follow-up information that we'll have. I offer resilience training, self-awareness trainings, as well as stress detox strategy for individuals and organizations. So feel free to send any questions my way. You can also go to my website, rituriyat.com, for more information about me.
Fantastic. So on behalf of the entire USC Alumni Association, we thank you, and we thank all of our Trojans on the call today for joining us. We have several programs on the USC Alumni website. I know Tanya and the other people at the Alumni Association have been really working to build the virtual content, so check it out over there. You can check out your favorite sites and groups on social media, and I think that's it. Thank you so much for joining us. Fight on. I have to say, I really am proud to be a Trojan right now. I mean, one of the reasons is that we fight on. That's what we do. We fight, we grow, we challenge, we embrace. And so thank you all for joining us, and talk to you soon. Fight on.